Welcome to the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships are forged. I'm Rebecca Monet, CEO and Chief Scientist at Zoracle Profiles, along with my co-host, community advocate, speaker, author, and entrepreneur, Tracy Kawa. Our special guests today are Patrick Alcorn and Richard Ashe. Patrick is the director of Veterans Business Outreach Center at the University of Texas at Arlington. He served 9 years in the United States Army, including time as a cadet at West Point. He has been an NCAA athlete, a combat engineer, a deputy city councilman, and an award-winning sales professional. Patrick is a 2016 SBA Small Business Champion of the Year and a 2018 Fort Worth Business Press C-Suite Award recipient. Wow, that's a tough one. His presentations deliver power, passion, and dynamic experience to inspire one to focus on value, leverage resources, implement strategies, and persist in building your business beyond the battlefield. And Rich is the founder and president at Veteran Franchise Advisors. Rich served in the United States Marine Corps from 1976 to 1984 in the infantry, and then as part of a joint Marine, Navy, and Air Force intelligence project. After his tenure in the Marine Corps, Rich obtained a degree in marketing and business management. Rich has worked for Fortune 500 companies such as Chase, Xerox, Compaq, and Hewlett-Packard to expand or start new businesses. During his 30 years in business, Rich helped to launch 3 software startups and participate in 2 successful IPOs. As an entrepreneur, Rich started 2 businesses of his own, a computer training service and an IT networking consulting firm. Rich also operated 2 franchises before starting Veteran Franchise Advisors. So both of these gentlemen know a little bit about business, Tracy.
Yeah, I hear that. They're so accomplished.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us today. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. So excited to get started.
Thank you both for your service to our country. I'm sure our listeners would want to hear what I want to hear, which is a little more about your backgrounds, each of you. Rich, why don't you start?
Okay. I was born in the Bronx, New York City product. Started my first business when I was very young. I was a media distribution consultant. They used to call them paper boys. And that kind of gave me my itch for entrepreneurship. I always had my own money. You know, it gave you kind of the basics of how to run a business, source your product, find your customers, sell the product, collect the money, right? But, you know, life is life. And, you know, I wasn't that well off. So I went into the Marine Corps right after high school. I had a little challenge. I had a son when I was very young. I was 16 years old when my son was born. So I had to figure out a way to make money, go to school, and plan for the future. Marine Corps was the perfect option for me at that particular time. Went into the infantry after my first 3 years. I started thinking I'm going to get out soon. So I had to figure out, well, no jobs for grunts. So let me go out and re-enlist. And I went into actually electronics. Came out of the Marine Corps. I was actually broker when I got out than when I went in. I don't understand that math, but that's what happened. Took my skills, and I was lucky, blessed, right place, right time, and I walked right into .com as an trained in electronics. I got really great jobs with Chase Manhattan Bank. I was their IT guy. Went on and did a startup with Xerox. Worked for HP, worked for Compaq. Started my own business in between all this fun stuff. And the first business I started was really successful. I had a partner who brought me in under his wing. He's one of my top 3 CEOs of all time. Really taught me the ropes on how to run a business. Unfortunately, he got ill and he had to leave the business. So packed up shop, went back into the corporate world. And I knew right then, nope, can't be here anymore. I got to go start another business. Went and started my second business, and it crashed and burned like a F-16 hitting the ground at Mach 4. Exactly. But it actually taught me more in the failure than it did from the successes. And I learned a lot of things that I thought I knew, but I didn't know, right? That's the biggest challenge for every entrepreneur is you do not know what you do not know. And the only way to find these things out is to reach out to resources and ask questions. And, you go out there and try, get up, dust yourself off, try it again.
Wow.
And through that process is when I kind of discovered franchising, because I kept saying, there's got to be an easier way. There's got to be an easier way. And I found franchising as a standard operating procedure. Here's your training. Here's what the business is. This is all the things you have to do. And I said, wow, this is a really great concept. And I went about going through the due diligence process of figuring out what makes a good franchise a good franchise. I almost got burned by my first franchise. I was in the process of buying a music video business. And I found out that Microsoft was getting ready to take the music on the internet, get rid of Napster and LimeWire for people. And I decided that, wow, if they're going on the internet, a brick and mortar business is not going to work for me. And that led me to, wow, I wonder how many times this happens to people every day. And so I went deeper into franchising to figure this stuff out. I bought my first franchise. It was something very familiar to me. It was a digital media company, SEO, web pages, and all that fun stuff. Being an IT guy, that was kind of in my area of expertise. And then I actually bought another franchise, which was a business coaching franchise. And I really kind of put the website stuff on the side because that wasn't my passion. That's what I could do. And I could do it really, really well, but there was no joy in it, right? It was just kind of like a safety net in case everything else failed. Well, I can always do websites, right? So I took that coaching business and I said, wow, I know what I really, really want to do, and take all that knowledge of franchising, take all that business knowledge that I learned, and wanted to turn it into a teaching, coaching, success business.
Right.
And right around 2008, 2009, when the housing market crashed and unemployment for veterans was at 14, 15%, I said, wow, this is a great opportunity. Forget about the job thing. Let's show veterans how they can get into business for themselves. Mm-hmm. And that was the launch of Veteran Franchise Advisors. This is our 11th anniversary this year. And it's been a really, really fun trip.
Yay! That's a big deal. That's a big deal when you think about 11 years in business, when the average business, right? So we're going to talk about that here in a second, and everything you're doing at Veteran Franchise Advisors. Thank you for sharing your background. I had no idea. Holy moly.
That's the Reader's Digest version.
Failure is one of the best lessons in life, isn't it? It's amazing. So Patrick, tell us a little bit about your background before you got into the military, and then that whole story to how you got the VBOC.
So I'm actually from South Central Los Angeles, and I got to tell you, I had no interest in being anywhere near the military, and none of my siblings or anyone else was part of the military. But I remember that when I was 9 years old, my first introduction to the military was I was trying to be like Rich. I was trying to be a Marine. So I was what they call a Marine Corps Devil Pup, which is the Marine Corps version of the Boy Scouts. I was a Marine Corps Devil Pup at Camp Pendleton Marine Corps Base in San Diego, California. And that was my first introduction to the military. And I just remembered what it was like being a part of that group and a part of that organization. And I rose to the rank of major and was commanding a battalion as a 9-year-old of Boy Scouts, so to speak. So it was a lot of fun. And so when I got into high school, in my senior year in high school, I was working for Mayor Tom Bradley, a five-term African-American mayor for the city of Los Angeles. And I walked in the office one day and he says, "Where are you going to college?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I had all these offer letters for football and track and field from a lot of West Coast Pac-10 schools." And he looked at me and he said, "Why don't you go to West Point?" And to be perfectly honest, I had no concept of what West Point was or anything of that nature. So the next day I walk into work And he says, come take a ride with me. So I get in the car with the mayor. We drive across town. We go into this 4-story office building, get off the elevator on the 4th floor, and we walk past the receptionist right on into this office. And the mayor looks at the guy sitting on the other side of the desk and says, this is the guy I'm telling you about. I don't know, I'm just hanging out with the mayor. The guy looks at me and he says, so you want to go to West Point, huh? Without trying to make the mayor look a little odd for not bringing it to my attention where we were going, I just said, yes, sir, as a high school senior. And therein lied my introduction to the United States Military Academy. So I got an appointment from Congressman Julian C. Dixon out of California to attend the United States Military Academy at West Point. I went into what they call a prep school. So a year prior to going to West Point, I went to the prep school to prepare for West Point. Then I spent 4 years at West Point to get a degree in engineering management. I ran track in my senior year. I played football on the NCAA Division I team. We were 2-2 versus Navy in our Army-Navy game, 2 commanders-in-chief trophies, and so forth. And then after leaving West Point, I went off to the engineers. I was 10th Engineer Battalion in Germany, where I spent the bulk of my time in the military. And when I got out of the military, I had to figure out what it is that I wanted to do. We're coming out of the first Gulf War, and I was thinking, what is it that I really want to do? And I didn't really want to do engineering.
Mm-hmm.
So I loved working out, having been an athlete. I was a deputy city councilman in Los Angeles, so I had some really good relationships with folks in Los Angeles and things of that nature. But I spent a lot of time at this gymnasium there, got to know the owner, and then bought in to the gym as a partner. So that was my first entrepreneur endeavor, was a partnership in owning this gym. Well, 6 months later, the partnership dissolved, and now I was the sole owner of this gym. The gym owner decided he wanted to go his own way, and so I paid a little extra money and bought the entire gym. And as Rich says, they say sometimes you win and sometimes you learn. That's my mentor and friend, John Maxwell, in his book. And this was my first lesson in entrepreneurship. I should have done better due diligence. I should have surrounded myself with a core group of advisors. I should have done a lot more things differently instead of just buying this gym and showing up every day thinking that business was going to go exactly as I wanted it to go. Because 18 months after that, the streets in front of my gymnasium were going through an 18 to 24 month major overhaul.
Oh, no.
And this was way back in the day when internet was just, was a thought in somebody's mind. So if you had an establishment, a brick and mortar establishment, your business was based upon people walking through that door and nothing more and nothing less. And there was no way to reach people. Marketing was very different because there was no such thing as social media or any of that other stuff. And for 18 months, people couldn't get to my facility. So I lost that gymnasium and so forth. So that was my first lesson. And then I moved here to Dallas, Texas, and I worked in pharmaceutical sales for a number of years. I was a top sales representative for the #1 pharmaceutical sales company in the world. And they decided to downsize. They went from 21,000 sales representatives down to 15,000 sales representatives. And guess who was one of the 6,000 that was let go?
Ouch.
Yeah, and this was me being a top sales representative. So I thought, wow, I'm never going to put myself in that position again where I can have a job on Friday and on Monday be wondering where my next paycheck's coming from. And so I started my second business, which was a training business to train people how to get into the pharmaceutical sales industry and how to be successful. I mean, that was where my success was and so forth. And so I did that for a number of years. And that kept me on the road doing lots of presentations. So in 2004, I did 211 presentations, 169 days on the road, teaching people how to get into the pharmaceutical industry and be successful. I have 4 grown kids, but at the time, my daughter, who's the youngest of the 4, she was in her junior year in high school. And she comes to me and she says, hey, Dad, how many of Montel, that's her oldest brother, how many of Montel's track meets did you go to? And you guys already hear where this is probably going.
Yeah.
I was so naive. I didn't know where this conversation was going because I was a pretty good dad and I was at all of my kids' events. And I was like, oh, I love track. I didn't miss a single event. I was pretty much, she said, well, how many of Q-Monty's basketball games, that's her older brother, did you go to? I'm all excited. Well, you know, I made the team highlight video. I may have missed a game here and there. And she says, Dad, how many of my gymnastics tournaments did you go to? And I'm still excited and everything. I said, well, I think I went to about 23, I think. This was 23. She said, Dad, we had 37. So I had missed almost half of her gymnastics tournaments without even knowing it. So forth. So I said to her, you know what? I'm going to come off the road and I'm going to go back into the pharmaceutical industry so I can be here for you in your senior year. So I went back into pharmaceutical sales, achieved the same level of success. We're at the top of the company and so forth. And then the same thing happened again. I'm out having breakfast with a doctor's office I think it was a Friday afternoon, I'm almost sure. I walk out of the doctor's office and my phone rings and it's the national sales director. He says, we're downsizing your position.
No.
I had been hired to launch a product that had never made it out of the FDA. And 2 years later, the product was still sitting at the FDA. And so the company decided this product is not going to leave the FDA. So they hired 348 of us to launch this new product. The product, we went out and established relationships and the product never left the FDA. So they let all 348 of us go. And I said, I told myself I'm never going to do this again. And so from that day forward, from 2005 onward, I have been in my own entrepreneur, owning my own business. I went to take a class. It was a weekend boot camp, 6 weekends in a row on entrepreneurship so that I can learn about being this business owner. And because I had experienced it in 2 previous businesses, I was able to add value in the class. After the class, I said, so now what? I'm talking to the instructor and the facilitators for the class. And I said, so now what? What do I do with all of this? And there was no now what. So I connected with the state of Texas. They had what's called the Veteran Entrepreneur Program. It was in its infancy. Mm-hmm. And I went into the Texas Veterans Commission and I said, hey, I can help teach folks the now what if you'll pay me to do it. And so I joined Texas Veterans Commission and I started teaching entrepreneurship all over the state of Texas through the Texas Veteran Entrepreneur Program. 2 years later, the U.S. Small Business Administration was expanding a program that they have called the Veterans Business Outreach Center. And that expansion was asking the folks in Texas to be responsible for Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. So the Texas Veterans Commission was applying for that opportunity. Mm-hmm. 3 days before applying for that opportunity, they came back and they said, the state of Texas cannot accept this opportunity because it includes Oklahoma and Arkansas. And Patrick, since you were going to be the director anyway, why don't you take this RFP and you go run the program? So they put the RFP in my hand and I went off to the University of Texas at Arlington where my offices already were with the state of Texas, went into the College of Business, talked to the dean and said, hey, Dean, I've got some funding that I can bring into the college if you'll help co-promote this and help co-sponsor this venture for me. And therein lies the start of the University of Texas Arlington's Veterans Business Outreach Center.
Boom. Yeah, really. I like that your stories overlap in some ways, that both of you had business partners and the business was going great. And then there was a loss of a business partner and circumstances caused things to go a different direction. Both of you getting to learn some valuable lessons. Wow. 2 different types of business, but both of you learning some valuable lessons, and both of you deciding that entrepreneurship was definitely the right answer for different reasons, family reasons, financial reasons, control your own destiny reasons, all reasons you hear every single day, I'm sure, Rich, when folks come to talk to you.
Yeah, I love it when people say, man, you're so lucky that you had these experiences. I'm like,
Yeah.
well, how do you define luck? What is luck to you?
Yeah.
And they always come up, well, right place, right time. I said, no. Simple definition: opportunity meeting preparation, right? When you prepare and the opportunity comes knocking on the door, you're prepared to take advantage of it. That's what a lot of people call lucky. If you don't prepare, opportunity may come by and you may not even see it, and it'll go right by you. And you're like, oh man, how come this doesn't work for me, or how come this didn't happen to me? Well, because you weren't prepared for it. You weren't able to recognize it when it was standing there in your face.
Yeah, I like what psychologist William James says. He said it's better to be prepared for an opportunity and not have one than to have an opportunity and not be prepared. So I'm constantly in preparation mode, constantly trying to stay prepared for when the opportunity arises, I'm ready to step into it.
Yeah, I like that. Better have it, not need it, than need it, not have it.
Right. The other overlap that I'm hearing is a sense of mentorship, like an early mentor, right? Someone who just said, hey, have you thought about going into the military? Or, hey, have you thought about this kind of business, right? Is there a sense of mentorship for both of you?
Yeah, and I think that's so critical, especially for the audience and the clients that I work with, which are servicemen and women that are in transition. The Department of Defense has a program called the Transition Assistance Program, and that program is designed originally to capture folks who were 18 months prior to exiting the military. But now they start that transition on day one when they enter, and they go through a bunch of training all the way up till they get out. But the bottom line is the Department of Defense created this program that says we're going to help servicemen and women to figure out their lives after they get out of the military. And so they got together with other federal agencies, particularly the Department of Labor, the Department of Education, and the U.S. Small Business Administration, and they created this training program in the Transition Assistance Program. And so every serviceman and woman 18 months prior to getting out of the military, they are enrolled in this program. They have 3 days of mandatory training to learn about being a civilian, even though I don't think you'll ever be a civilian. I mean, once you wear the uniform, you're a veteran. You're never a civilian. That's not a life that you'll ever live again. But in any sense, so you spend 3 days of mandatory training, and then you have 2 days of optional training. The optional training that every serviceman and woman has is in 3 tracks. They can either train to go and get a job that's managed by the Department of Labor. They can train to go get a degree that's managed by the Department of Education, or they can train to start a business, which is managed by the U.S. Small Business Administration. And so my office, there's 23 offices just like mine all across the nation. We cover more than 200 military installations across the U.S. and some outside the U.S., but we deliver a 2-day entrepreneur course to teach folks the foundational information that they need to make one decision and one decision only. Is entrepreneurship right for me? That's it. It's not an MBA course. It's not a course in accounting. It's not a course in anything else related to business. It's simply a course to give you the foundational information and knowledge that you need so that 2 days later, you can walk out of that course and say, wow, I want to follow this entrepreneur track and be an entrepreneur, or no, that's not what I want to do with the rest of my life. And so that's where I am, and that's what our program is. And so our mission is pretty simple. I'm putting my glasses on so I can read it specifically, but our mission is pretty straightforward. Our mission, first and foremost, is to increase the awareness of entrepreneurial development services through the Business-to-Business Transition Assistance Program and other training and outreach activities. So we want to make sure that servicemen and women are aware that entrepreneurship is a viable option. The next part of our mission is to facilitate access to entrepreneurial development services in collaboration with the SBA resource partners, including federal, state, and local entrepreneur development entities. So we not only want to make sure you're aware of them, but we want to connect you to them. And so we host multiple outreach activities and programs that will actually introduce you to SCORE, actually introduce you to the Small Business Development Center or the Women's Business Center and other resources like Veteran Franchise Advisor and Rich and other folks of that nature. And then last but not least, our mission is to inspire you to take action in terms of growing and developing your business. Because it's one thing to have information, right? education is only information. Information to produce a transformation must be coupled with motivation. And what we got to do is motivate you to use all of these resources to get your businesses up and running. That's who we are and what we do.
I like the threefold process that you have there. And honestly, veteran or not veteran, I think everyone should have an opportunity to make those decisions. Am I someone that's going to be better in a career? Am I going to be better in a trade? Am I going to be better in a business? Should I get a degree? Those things I think all of us could use. And I'm so grateful that this is available to veterans to, once they're done this program, they know, am I wired to be an entrepreneur? Yes or no, which then allows them to go to the next phase and find additional resources.
Well, this is a makeup test, right? Because back after World War II, right, the boom economy, part of the GI Bill was loans to start businesses, right? Korean War was still in there. Vietnam War, it kind of went away. After that, there were no facilities for GI, for veterans coming out of the military to get resources in order to start businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And from the military's perspective, it was boot camp. Let's turn you into a serviceman, right? Marine, Army, Airman, Seaman, whatever. And then when your tour is up, it's like, see ya.
Mm-hmm.
My transition out of the Marine Corps was I worked up until the day before I was supposed to get out. The day I was supposed to get out, I walked to the commander's office. They gave me a file. They took my ID badge and put it through a shredder, gave me a temporary gate pass and said,
Adios.
Yeah, that was my transition assistance program, right?
Uh-huh.
I had to figure all this stuff out on my own. And one of the things that how Patrick and I got together was I had an opportunity to go look at the entrepreneur track of the franchise of the program, and there was like one bullet point, you could do franchising. That was it. There was no other information in that. And so I asked around, and I found the right people to talk to, and Patrick was one of them. Is, listen, can you give me an hour in the program to just talk about why veterans and franchising go well together, and whether or not this is a viable path to consider as you're making those entrepreneurial decisions.
And that decision was a no-brainer because it was such a perfect fit with the content that Rich was bringing in terms of franchising and helping folks to recognize the viability of entrepreneurship, the viability of being self-employed. And we still use that term, when we're talking in the military connected entrepreneur community, when we use the word entrepreneurship, for some that's a little way up here and way out here. So instead we call it just self-employment, because the Department of Labor has got them so focused on getting a job that the word employment is stuck in their brain. So we say, yeah, you can have employment, but consider it as self-employment. You're employed, but you work for yourself. And here are some viable options for you to work for yourself. And so it was great to get this relationship with Rich and to bring Rich into the program and to be able to share that information. And we've done it with several other folks that are that have the same role that Rich has as well.
Yeah, one of the questions I love to ask in class is, so what's the largest franchise model in the world, right? Everybody looks around. Subway, McDonald's, those sort of things. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's close. But the military is the largest franchise model in the world, right? And when you look at it, you sign a long-term contract, you put up some equity in the military, you say, yes, sir, I'm going to run towards the bullets. In the civilian sector, you put up some money, right? Then they send you off to your boot camp. And boot camp, what you learn is how to represent a brand, right? Marine Corps, Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, whatever it is. When you leave boot camp, all you know how to do is walk, talk, smoke, eat in a military proficient manner according to the standard operating procedures of that particular branch of service. And then they send you off to your military occupational specialty training, your MOS training, right? If you're going to be a cook, you're not learning how to shoot artillery. If you're going to be a helicopter pilot, you're not learning how to cook, right? And then they assign you to wherever you're going to do your job. And when you go out there, you say, okay, Corporal, go do what you're supposed to do. And you say, oh, well, I know I've seen this in training. Let me open my training manual, or let me check my standard operating procedures. And if the information is not there, you check with your peers, right? And if they don't have the answers, you run it up the chain of command so you get all the information to execute your mission. Every serviceman that I've ever spoken to relates to that. That is how every single franchise model in the world, not in the US, but in the world works. So it's 100% transferable skill set. If you have been able to navigate success in the military, you can take that same sort of skill set and apply it to franchising and achieve success by following the SOP, by working with your chain of command, leadership, perseverance, ability to work under pressure, right? Us Marines like to say, improvise, adapt, and overcome.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's what makes you successful in franchising. And that's why I thought it was such a great fit for the SBA VBOC program.
Yeah, and that success has bared itself out. VetFran, part of the International Franchise Association, which is sort of the affinity group for veteran-owned franchises, put some data out a couple of years ago that showed that veterans who own franchises generate 5 to 10 times more revenue than veterans who start their own businesses. And the numbers were $250,000 in annual revenue versus $2 million in annual revenue. So I always tell people, when you think about the franchise fee or you think about royalties, don't think of that as the cost that you pay to be in franchising. Think of that as the price you pay to speed your path to profitability. Because had you not had this SOP or this franchise model, it could be 3 to 5 years before you start generating, or even longer, before you start generating $2 million in revenue, right, in your own business. But when you have a franchise model, because of all of the other things associated with the franchise, the buying power, the proven concept itself, the economies of scale, all the other benefits of franchising begin to come into play, you can get to profitability a lot faster and grow profitability a lot higher than you could on your own in the same type of business.
I always like to tell them, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
Franchising gives you the answers to all the things that you don't know. It's not the end of the game, it's the beginning of the game, right? Because if you invest in a franchise, you can run it for 2 years, and guess what? If you're really successful, you sell the franchise, right? And what you get out of that is brand equity, right? Your McDonald's or your Subways is going to be a lot more valuable than, Tom's Subway shop, right? It just is. That's the way it is, right? So it's a great place to start. Get some really good sharp edges on your entrepreneurial skills. Learn how a business is run. Learn how to replicate it. Because one of the things that I guess is kind of like my next frontier is business resiliency, right? Is how do you start a business, but how do you keep a business? And how do you grow the business? And what happens when we have times like 2009, when we have the housing crash, or 2020, when we have a pandemic? So what are the things you need to do to ensure your business stays viable, right? And franchising can also teach you a lot of things about that as well.
Yeah, I've actually seen that personally, having been in franchising the last 30 years. If an individual started a business, a mom and pop shop or whatever, and how they survived during this pandemic, rather than a franchisee and how they survived during this pandemic, it was like night and day. Franchisor is busy adjusting, adapting, doing what is necessary to pivot and reposition, while the franchisees got their head down working on their local marketplace. So, you got this organization that is doing the R&D, doing the projections, looking at the future, making the adjustments. So you're able to focus on what you do, which is the business.
I can actually give you a really great example of that. There's a drug testing lab urine analysis, DNA testing, things like that there. And when the pandemic hit, what they did is they quickly got together as an organization, right? And then spun up mobile COVID testing buses, right? And it gave their franchisees something to do while they were trying to figure out navigating through the pandemic, right? And now it's another part of their franchise business revenue structure.
That's a great example. And I've seen many of those types of examples that individually we wouldn't be able to do. But as a franchise organization, it can be done because the resources, the brain power is there to make that happen. Wow. Well, you guys are quite the dynamic duo. So
we're still fighting over who's Batman and Robin.
Is that it?
Yeah. You know, when the Marines and the Army get together, when we're in battle, we're the best of friends. And then outside of battle, we have this little bit of competition going between us.
Yeah,
so right
rivalry.
So right now, when it comes to helping servicemen and women get up and running and start their next phase of life, Rich and I are in battle together. So we're fighting on the same team right now.
Yeah.
It's interesting because you mentioned earlier that I wish this was available to everybody. But 2% of the US population ever serve in the military, right? It's a very, very small group, right? But once their service is done, you know, you hear the, thank you for your service and all that fun stuff. But people go on and do what they need to do. And these guys have lived a very different life, right? And when you transition into the civilian sector, one of the things that you don't really realize is financial, right? Because the military has a lot of soft dollars that prop you up. You know, you got the PX, you got bachelor's quarters, and you get funds for living expenses. And when you go out, when you leave the military, all that stuff goes away, and guys negotiate salaries based on their past salaries. And they find out later on that I should have negotiated more. Because all this stuff is gone, right? Free dental, free health, this, that, and the other thing, right? And it's a really real change. And one of the things that I'm hoping that we do in the future, this is kind of a future sort of thing, is start teaching financial literacy on the front end of military service, as opposed to having them help figure it out on their own when they get out, which is too late.
I second that. Yeah.
So, Rich, I understand how VBOC supports transitioning veterans. How does Veteran Franchise Advisors help to support transitioning veterans? Okay.
Well, we work with the VBOC. We provide that other alternative, right? I always talk about, you think about starting a business, but one of the first things you have to do is look at your competition. If you're going to start a sandwich shop, well, guess what? There's lots of sandwich shops out there. Make sure you look at them and know that how they compete in the marketplace, and decide how you're going to price your product, or how you're going to sell your product, price, quality, value, what it's going to be. But Veteran Franchise Advisors started back in 2010. We decided that we wanted to be a free service for veterans to help them navigate the world of franchising. We work like a real estate broker, right? If you were going to move to a new state and you knew nothing about the state, nothing about the communities, you'd go see a real estate broker and say, hey, I'm looking for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house in a cul-de-sac with a really great school district. And if you tried to do that on your own, you would spend days, weeks, months trying to figure that out. So what we do is we put together a program. It's kind of a 6-step program where you come in and you say, listen, I'm thinking about starting a business. I'm not sure where I want to go. And we help you kind of delve into your passions, your skill set, your financial capabilities. And then we walk you through the process of selecting franchises. The VetFran, the International Franchise Association, VetFran has already gone out and negotiated some really great financial incentives for veterans. So we have a list of all those franchises that are veteran friendly and things like that there. So we go and shop and we bring back 3 or 4 or 5 opportunities to them. Patrick has actually gone, he tested me walked me through the process one time. And then we go back and we say, okay, here's 3 or 4 options for you. What do you think? This is what it's going to cost. This is what the investment is. Oh, well, do you have finance? You have 401k, TSP, IRA, any of that dollars? Let's figure out what your financial position is. And then we take them, we actually introduce them to the franchisor as a 3-way call. And then we walk them through the due diligence process, making sure they consult a franchise attorney along the way, because there's some legal documentation that's attached to a franchise. We make sure they talk to a CPA, make sure they set up the right sort of entity, if they're going to be an S Corp or an LLC or a C Corp. And then we walk them, make sure they go through the due diligence process by providing them questions they ask the franchisor or questions they ask franchisees, making sure they go to the discovery day, they examine all the documents that are involved in there. And then if they decide to invest, we turn them over to the franchisor takes them from there and puts them through their training. Veterans are so sought after in franchising, because if we go back to the, what's the largest franchise model in the world, and if you've been successful, they love having veterans in their operations, because they know, here's a standard operating procedure. Yes, sir, I'm going to go take care of this. Here's your training manual. Yes, I'm going to read every page of this, right?
Wow.
And they're going to follow the system, right? And the system is what makes them successful. So they love to have franchises run their system, and they come to me to help find those guys that fit into their model very, very well, and they're willing to pay me for it. So I'm not a nonprofit. I am a for-profit organization, but everything I do for the veterans is for free.
Because you're self-employed, right?
Yeah.
I am actually an employee of an S corporation.
There you go, even better.
So I
Just in case the IRS is listening.
value. I like to comment on Richard's value as well by just saying that, I tell clients this all the time. I say, if you have a legal problem, you call a legal professional, right? You call an attorney. If you have a medical problem, you call a medical professional, right? You get a physician. If you have a problem with ghosts, you call a Ghostbuster.
Ghostbusters.
Right. So if you're looking at franchising, you need someone who's a professional in that field, and that's your franchise brokers. Like Rich always says, you don't know what you don't know. So don't pretend like you know, when you can obviously go to someone who knows and help them, and they can help you walk through that particular process. And so I think it's so important, not just for franchising, but I think for anything related to entrepreneurship. So when you go back to the mission of the BBOC and what it is that we try to do, when you come out of the military, you want to make sure that you connect with all of the resources that are available to you to help you in your next phase of life. We know one of the challenges folks that have worn the uniform has is, one is they don't like to self-identify, so they don't necessarily tell everybody that they were in the military. And then 2, the biggest problem is they don't like asking for help, right? They want to go out and execute this mission on their own. They made a decision that I'm going to do this, and now they're just going to figure it out on their own and walk through the steps. That is not a smart decision for you to make when it comes to starting your own business and becoming self-employed. You want to connect to folks who've been there and done that, folks who understand. You want to connect to all the resources that are out there. An example that I might give is in the state of Texas, there's a new Senate bill that's getting ready to pass. I think it's Senate Bill 938. It used to be Senate Bill 1049. But in the state of Texas, if you form a legal entity, you do not have to pay the state filing fee to form that legal entity. That's a $300 savings that you get. And you get 5 years waiver on the business taxes. So you don't have to pay taxes on the revenue that you generate for 5 years. And if you don't connect with your resources, you'll come into the state of Texas, you'll start your business, you'll pay that $300 filing fee. And then every year you'll be filing taxes and paying taxes on your revenue because you did not connect with your resources, because you didn't get the information. So don't do that. Connect with your resources and get the information.
Oh, you guys are just brilliant. Just a wealth of knowledge, experience, and of course, these resources. So last question to both of you before I ask you how people can get in touch with you. both of you are expressing a ton of purpose and passion here. You can clearly see you're doing what is right for you. So here's my question. What's next? What's next? What, if you could draw your future for yourself, for VBOC, for yourself and Veterans Franchise Advisors, what's next? What's your next, I want to accomplish this, or I wish the world would do this? What's next? I'm going to start with you, Rich. What's next?
Wow. You know, really, the way I would like to end my service to this country is by figuring out how to get veterans in their GI Bill the option of starting their own business. If I can get that done, right, that would be great. And the logic behind that, or the common sense behind that, is pretty much every state out there today provides free college for veterans. You've got a $150,000 GI Bill, give or take $1 here, $1 there, that's awarded to you for your service. Now, if you're getting college for free, you can use a couple of dollars there for some books, maybe some rent, some different things there. But there's a large hunk of money there. Why not take a portion of that money and offer it to veterans? Listen, you want to start a business? Well, have you done your prerequisites? Have you gotten at least your associate's degree, right? Are you buying an existing business? Are you looking at a franchise, right? And say, okay, yeah, you meet all these requirements. Here's a portion of, not all of it, but here's 50K of that to help you start your business. You would be surprised. I know this particularly in franchising.
Wow.
50K goes a long way to a lot of different businesses that you can invest in. And it's the same as education, right? You are actually getting an education. Success or fail, you're going to get an education, right? And so if I can get that done in the next year, 2 years, 10 years, that's where I kind of say, stick the dagger in the ground and say, I'm done.
Wow, that's a big, bodacious goal. That'll change a whole lot of lives, For some people, they don't want to get a master's degree, a bachelor's degree, that they really are, as Patrick pointed out, wired for self-employment, business ownership. And if they could take those resources and apply it that way. So we're behind you. Keep us posted how that big, bodacious goal goes. Patrick, what about you and VBOC? What's next?
That's interesting. I'm so much in support of Rich's goal. There's a subcommittee for veteran-owned businesses at the U.S. Small Business Administration, there's a committee at the U.S. Small Business Administration for veteran-owned businesses. And out of that committee, there's a subcommittee that I sit on that's related to access to capital for veterans. And that's the conversation we're having right now. And we're really trying to push this agenda to just help folks understand that not everybody is going to use those education dollars and so forth. And those dollars should be made available to them to start their businesses. And we're trying to fight through some of the challenges and some of the objections of why it's not available to them. But for me, in 2017, I founded a conference called the Business Beyond the Battlefield Conference. And that conference is just an offshoot of what we do at the VBOC, but it's an opportunity for us to spend 3 days every year where we curate all of these resources and bring them all together in one place. And we bring in the military connected entrepreneur community to do the very 3 things that are part of our mission statement. We increase their awareness and let them know, hey, here are all the resources. We facilitate access to those resources in this 3-day conference where they get to meet all of the folks and so forth. And then we inspire them with motivational speakers. My closing keynote this year was John Maxwell, the #1 top leadership guru in the world and so forth. And so we've connected our program to John Maxwell as well. So he'll be with us every year as part of that conference. But that's for me, is to take that conference. And like Rich said, this is not going to be a nonprofit venture for me. This will be a for-profit venture for me. But just to take that conference turn it into a revenue stream and just begin to expand it. It started off with 77 attendees in 2016, and now we've been as high as 461 attendees.
Wow.
2020 and 21, we went virtual, and in 22, we're going back to a live conference, but we're going to do it hybrid. We're going to do live and virtual in 2022, but that's where I'm headed. I'm headed to the point of where I want to take my passion for connecting servicemen and women to the entrepreneurial resources, build out this conference into a 3-day conference that happens every year, and whatever association comes out of it, and just continue to push that conference to make that resource available.
And boom.
Yeah.
Purpose and passion just collided.
There you go.
Boom. Well, you, both of you, I commend you to this commitment you've made to your fellow servicemen and women. No doubt you've made huge differences in many, many lives, and many, many more lives and communities in the future. So we will be your cheerleaders. We're not veterans, but we can be your cheerleaders, right, Tracy? We can do that.
We call you patriots, Rebecca.
I'm a patriot. You got it.
Yeah, we love our patriots, right? And I always tell my patriots, thank you for paying your taxes so that we could.
That's right. We'll keep paying those taxes and writing those
There
checks.
you go.
Honor to
All right.
serve.
So real quickly, and we'll wrap this up. How do folks get hold of you? Patrick, you did put in the text chat a means to learn more about VBOC. We'll make sure to put that in our show notes, but could you also, for the recording, how do people get hold of you if they want to learn about VBOC or they want to work with you at Veterans Franchise Advisors?
Sure. So I'm going to give you 2 web addresses for the VBOC. If they want to get my VBOC specifically, I'm responsible for Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas, and I'm on the University of Texas at Arlington in the College of Business. So my web address is uta.edu/VBOC, Victor Bravo Oscar Charlie. But if they're not in Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas, to find their own VBOC wherever they are, because we're representing all the states across the US, they can just go to the SBA at sba.gov/VBOC, Victor Bravo Oscar Charlie. When they go to the SBA website, they can find all of the VBOCs and find the one that's serving them.
All 23 of them.
That's correct.
Perfect. And Rich, how does someone get hold of you?
You see, I raised my camera. www.veteranfranchiseadvisors, ADVISERS.com, or you can email me at same rich at veteranfranchiseadvisors.com. Give me a call.
Boom.
832-816-7424.
There you go. All right. Tracy, any last minute thoughts on your part?
Just thinking about how it's incredible how both of your passions and both of your goals are actually have actually helped so many people and are going to help so many more. And I just love what you're doing. And just how can we support you?
Bravo.
I love what I do as well. It's the longest job I've ever had. I've never had a job lasting more than 5 years. This has been
11 years.
11 years.
It's more like a
Stop
passion
working.
than a
This is
job.
no longer a job for me.
No,
I'm
you're
actually doing what I
self-employed.
love, so it's no longer a job anymore.
Yeah, they love what they do, and it shows.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you guys for listening in today to the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships are forged. We'll see you next week on the next episode.